Yeah, hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening this from. By the way, Happy New Year 2021. I hope you all had a great, relaxing break, and I believe you're all doing well. So, this is Raghu Banda again. Let us now continue our podcast series. In the first two podcasts, we have discussed about the first one was more on giving a introduction into the podcast series about what I'm going to talk and so on and so forth and the other things. And in the second podcast series, we also briefly went into the historical background from my standpoint and also from the standpoint of SAP and the journey of how we are currently moving in here. So that was a kind of a transition into the new year. And now let us get into the new year with the podcast three of the series. And here we will give a quick or a high level overview about the technical details or the architectural details and the business details behind the different ways of doing predictive analytics and machine learning with SAP S4HANA. I know this is going to be a little challenging because some of the concepts I'm trying to explain will be easier on a white paper and board or maybe in a video session, but I'm trying to put it in a different spin so that you can understand the concepts of the architecture and the technical details. In that way, you would know what exactly I'm speaking rather than putting it down on the paper. So let me attempt in doing that. So we did discuss about what we are focusing on, right? Like we want to see how the journey of SAP leveraging predictive analytics and machine learning in SAP S4HANA. That is what we started in. Now we are in here. The overall idea is that there are two main challenges here we are trying to address. The first challenge is that how do we enhance the business processes or the enterprise businesses or the enterprise customers. They have their end-to-end business process, and how do we enhance this business process with intelligence? That is the first and foremost thing. Second important thing is that how can we make these enterprises machine learning ready? So it's not a very easy task. So there are, as you know, SAP has about uh, more than 250,000 customers. If and the, for example, the ERP business software, which is now SAP S4HANA, has more than 250 million lines of code and about 145,000 or 140 about 140,000 tables involved in that. And then there are about it supports about more than 25 industry verticals and more than 10 lines of businesses. And of course, it has localizations for about 64 countries. And we have many thousands of business processes involved in here. So, as you might rightly think, there are two big substantial challenges which have to be addressed. One is that how we can systematically integrate machine learning into the business processes so that it is very easy for the end user to consume, the users of these enterprise software. And the second thing is that how do we make all these enterprises machine learning ready? So these are the two main things we are going to focus on. So before getting there, of course, we all know that intelligence is defined in different ways, right? Like you have some data with you, and based on the data, you get some insights, and then some of these insights can be manual. That's how in the previous generations or in the previous decades. That's how we have been doing before the inception of these uh, technology tools. So enhancing intelligence or identifying intelligence is always there, whether you do it manually or whether you do it using some rule-based techniques or with the predictive analytics and machine learning techniques. So we will now get into this thought process of how we are trying to operationalize this intelligence. So I would not say that this is how intelligence has to be defined. Intelligence has been a lot of debates and there's a lot of history on what is intelligence, what is a common definition of intelligence. It is it is different. So let us talk in the context of S4 and what we are trying to do in the context of S4 to address these things. So as long as you can reduce the total cost of ownership, total cost of deployment, and increase your total uh, your total worth for the value of your money and provide the end results and provide a complete end-to-end process, that would be, and of course if you can provide these results at a faster processing times, that is enough for the customers. So how do we do that is the million dollar question, and there are different ways of doing it. And as you know, there are different steps involved in this, right? Like you start with data acquisition. How do you acquire data? Different ways of acquiring the data. And how do you input this data? The second thing is that informational analysis. How do you analyze this data that is acquired? Like you have this descriptive analysis. The diagnostic descriptive analysis might be something like what happened, and the diagnostic analysis is more like why did it happen, and then you have this predictive analysis is that what will happen. So right, these are the different ways of doing it, right? And then you have prescriptive analysis where what should we do, and then you have the cognitive analysis where you have an autonomous self-learning analysis of happenings, right? So the overall idea is that in the context of S4 HANA, we have to reach that cognitive stage. That is where we are going in. So like I mentioned, you have the data acquisition is the first step, then the information analysis, and then how do you make decision making, and then finally executing the actions. So these are, I would say, broadly identified when before you come up with any designing or before you make any thoughts about putting your architectural details and making sure that you address what is needed. I'll take a pause here because I would want you to digest about what we have discussed so far. What we are discussing is that understanding the technical concepts or the architectural concepts of how SAP S4 HANA is infusing intelligence, leveraging the predictive analytics and machine learning technologies into the end-to-end processes. And we briefly talked about how we are going about it. What are the main challenges and what are the different steps involved in here? We'll take a little pause and we'll come back. All right, welcome back. Let us now continue our journey of understanding how to operationalize intelligence before we get into the actual architecture topics, right? So we discussed about the methodology. We are discussing about the methodology of and the steps involved in there, which is where acquiring the data and then identifying the data or analyzing the data. And then once you analyze the data, you would obviously want to see what are the decision-making things that you'll need to do depending on the data, and then do some kind of finally the action execution part of it. Now that we understand the methodology behind that, let us look briefly into the business view and the technology view when talking about the architectural principles. So any enterprise or the businesses, their overall aim is to increase their top line and bottom line revenues by using any modern ERP, whether it is the SAP software or any other XYZ software. So this is where you have to increase the level of intelligence in the business process, which attains automation to some extent. So mere automation will not increase the intelligence, and mere intelligence based on your data will not help. So you need to have your end-to-end process need to have intelligence embedded, intelligence personified with the automation technologies, and that is where you can address all these needs. And now, briefly looking into the technology view, you will need to understand how you get there. How do you what is the technology view? How do you get there? This is not one tool or one concept, right? Like you have various concepts and tools and technologies that are involved, and how do you make your complete end-to-end process uh, more intelligent? So, as we all know, like I briefly explained, there are these categorization of techniques are available, and you can realize at different levels. You have the manual level of realizing this, you have the rule-based level, and currently we are going into the self-learning mode. So this is where we are getting in there, right? So you will have to understand at each of these levels, what are the different things that we are addressing. We have the enterprises, I think the journey has already happened from a manual mode into a rule-based mode, and now the enterprises are moving into this self-learning mode, which is where in the self-learning mode, you will have your enterprises accessing these intelligent business processes, which have all these different technologies integrated and embedded, starting with your machine learning and predictive analytics, and also adding additional IoT or Internet of Things data, which is a sensor data. And you have these requests or you have these tasks which are handled by your conversational AI applications or bots, and then overall automating this whole thing so that at the first few steps, maybe a data scientist or a business process, a data scientist or an application developer is making some of these, but over a period of time, you automate this process, and the process over a period of time, you learn about these steps that are involved, and then you will understand, and then based on that, the next steps are implemented. So that is how you reach to the final level of automation with intelligence embedded into the end-to-end processes. So with that, I will now get into the concepts, basic concepts of the architecture. Before we get into the detailed architecture level, I think I would briefly go into the architecture overview. So like I mentioned here, there are the architecture has been designed based out of the customer pain points or the requirements that we have. Each of, like I've mentioned, there are thousands of business processes, and the intelligence is being embedded into these business processes depending on the customer requirements. So you will not see the intelligence embedded in all the business processes, but you will see a kind of an approach where there is a lot more need from the customers or the partners, and based on that, you would see we are applying this. So based on that, the architecture has been built, and you will understand that there are different machine learning application patterns that are also taken into consideration. For example, we'll start with something like matching. You will have to assign relationships and detect similarities between different uh, things that are happening or identify the anomalies in a given data set. So that is one of the core requirement, right? And when you're doing some pattern, when you're building some of these use cases where you have to leverage machine learning, and there are different types of these, right? Like you could start with uh, different content types. It something like uh, text matching or image matching. In case of text matching, you search for a text and replace it. In case of an image, it can be a set of pictures of a baby pictures, or you're trying to find similarity uh, or the pictures that you have and identify this particular person. Or it can be audio, where you're trying to match a particular audio stream from a particular query. Or video. You want to identify in a cricket match or a baseball game, identify how many times a particular company logo has appeared. Or you can even go to some more complex or complicated business objects where you want to match some invoices of goods receipts and find a duplicate customer, right? So these are some of the things that you go through when you're discussing about the matching kind of functionality. And there will be different kinds of matchings, the relationship matching or compatibility matching or a similarity matching, wherein you'll identify what is needed. And then, so that is one level of use cases or one set of use cases where you will get into. Then you have recommendations, right? Recommendations, you propose recommendations based on historical perspectives or based on things that have happened in the past or the data set that you have, and recommend some kind of suggestions. There might be some additional input assistance needed, and you could also provide some solution proposals which could be given. But recommendations is again one big field of machine learning where you have quite a lot of use cases that will be leveraged. Then you go further, you understand ranking. You want to rank uh, between relevant versus less relevant information that you have in a particular data set. For example, you want to see the top suppliers for a particular product, right? Uh, you have your customers buying some products at a particular location. You want to kind of rank these products based on different things, whether it is on the value of the product or usage of the product or a particular score, so on and so forth. Then you have finally another kind of area, another kind of field where you do predominantly predictions. You predict based out of the information that you have or the things that have happened, or you already have some information and how the results have been provided based on the historical perspectives. So based on that, you take that data set and then you do some kind of training and then do predictions and forecast future data. This will be very much useful in planning kind of scenarios, or this is very much helpful in that kind of a scenario. And then you have a whole set of field where you have these categorization or classification of different sets of data, right? You segment it by different groups, and then you can identify that these are the kind of, you will have to categorize or classify based on some particular data set or some particular variable. You identify, the algorithm will identify based on some kind of characteristics, and then you group under these different things. And then finally, you have, like I mentioned earlier, a conversational AI kind of an approach where you want to create a purchase order or create a purchase. You purchase something and you find that information and you speak into that. So those are some of the thoughts which were put when the architecture is being prepared or architecture is being laid out before you build these use cases. So you understand the customer pain points, you understand the use cases, you understand the different fields where you're coming from, and then you build on the architecture, right? So that is where we are going. And of course, there are some basic guiding principles that you follow when you're doing this architecture, right? You have different technology solutions are available, whether it is for user interface or analytics or integration or the transactions that you do on a daily basis. But you will have to understand that you cannot use different models at different levels. So that is the reason the one of the core guiding principles is that we want to leverage one common model and that can be unified across. So that is the reason the data model of SAP S/4HANA is based on the core data services uh, architecture, which is where you finally what you do is there is no redundancy in the data modeling that you have. The second thing is that multiple deployments are possible, right? Like you will be deploying, the deployment options can be in cloud or on premise, or it can be public cloud or hybrid cloud environments. So you should make sure that the machine learning applications are uh, consistent in whichever kind of deployment you're doing. And finally, the other very important thing is you will need to have your algorithms staying close to the data, which is where the golden rule is that don't take the data to the algorithm, but you should always make sure that your algorithm is closer to the data. Algorithm is nothing but like a piece of code, right? Like few lines of code. It is always very beneficial and very cheap to have your algorithm or the piece of lines of code around your data rather than doing the other way around. So this is another most important thing that we have put across when we are building this. And then based on that, the whole solution architecture has been designed. And here, like in one of my earlier podcasts, I think in the podcast, in the second podcast, I was briefly explaining since we have these different ways of doing predictive analytics and machine learning with SAP S4, I was explaining like in these different approaches, there are different ways of how we are doing this. So we are always trying to make sure that we follow the golden rule of taking the algorithms to the data. And hence, in the solution architecture, you will identify, in our architecture, you'll identify that this is how the things have been built. You will notice that when you pick up your uh, SAP S4 HANA box or business processes, some of the business processes have this intelligence embedded. You will notice that the business logic is sitting in the S4 HANA box. And some of these use cases, your algorithms and data, everything is residing in here. Whereas, and these are called the embedded use cases, embedded scenarios. Whereas in some other scenario, and your application data is also sitting in that. So which makes that it is much more easier and faster for execution purposes. And on the other side, when we have the, the second approach of doing side-by-side machine learning models, where you build a machine learning service which sits on the top of your SAP cloud platform, and then you create your machine learning service, which is now kind of consumed by your application or the business process on SAP S/4HANA, or it can be any other third-party application. So that is the So this approach, we call it as the side-by-side approach. And in here, what is happening, the most important point is that even here, we still focus on doing the maintaining the golden rule of taking the algorithm to the data. The data is on SAP Cloud Platform. So your algorithms or your machine learning algorithms that we use are all on SAP Cloud Platform, and we build the service there. Only the business logic resides in S4 or the third-party application. So in that way, your service is built, machine learning service is built. All you do is that you do the configuration between your machine learning service, where it is hosted, where it is sitting, whether it is SAP Cloud Platform, and then your actual application, whether it is an S4 or the third party. In that way, it is much more easier for the execution of this. So here what happens is that one most important thing you need to remember is that there, in some scenarios, we are leveraging the leveraging the option of embedding machine learning and predictive analytics into the business process that is situated or living on SAP S/4HANA, where the data is not humongous, and that is the reason it is embedded in the process. These are predominantly your use cases around classification or grouping, or it can be some kind of regression analysis, so on and so forth. But on the other side, there is, if you go to any of the deep learning technologies or deep learning techniques that you need, whether it is text recognition, text search, image search, video recognition, voice recognition, those are the things you need a lot more data that is needed. Hence, these services are built on SAP Cloud Platform. And again, here, you can use the other different approaches here. Uh, Either you can use you have your AI foundation platform sitting on the SAP Cloud Platform, where you build these deep learning algorithms. And these deep learning algorithms have a mix of hybrid algorithms coming in from SAP or outside of SAP, like your TensorFlows and Python libraries. So the overall concept is that we are trying to understand how the architecture is built based on your embedded models as well as your side-by-side models. And then we also have this a different approach with the side-by-side models when we extend it using SAP Analytics Cloud for a business user. Even a business user can get on board and build some quick models. So that is again done on SAP Cloud Platform using SAP Analytics Cloud. So bottom line is that what I'm trying to bring home the point is that your data is residing, your data might be residing on your S4 application or SAP Cloud Platform or any third party, but your machine learning algorithms are written around and on the same stack of where you have your data. And then the architecture is built in such a way, uh, I'll take a brief break and then we go into the details about how this architecture is built, whether it is embedding into the business process or whether we are building a side-by-side machine learning service and how it is leveraged. I hope this gives you a brief understanding about where we are going. So we'll conclude this session here. Basically, we talked about the architecture concepts at a high level, and also we briefly talked about the guiding principles, and also gave a quick introduction into the different ways of doing the machine learning and predictive analytics. So in the next session, I will go into much more details about each of these different ways of doing the machine learning, whether it is with the embedded machine learning or with the side-by-side machine learning that we are talking about. We'll go in each of the session, we'll go into the architecture details, explaining how we have built this now that you understood the concepts and the guiding principles. So I wish you all good luck. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening in from. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.